starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to CTL's Education Professional Development Series. My name is Stephanie Shea, Marketing Manager here at CTL. I'm joined by Mike Mahaney, VP and Chief Marketing Officer, and Amy Al-Khalisi, our EdTech Project Manager. For those of you who are not familiar with CTL, we are headquartered in Portland, Oregon, and have been providing innovative IT solutions to education. Sorry about my slideshow, everybody, to education and government customers for over 26 years. Some of our most popular products include our brands of ruggedized CTL and To-Go PC. Sorry, there's something wrong with the slide number 2. I'm trying to get us there. CTL and To-Go PC laptops, convertibles, 2-in-1s, and tablets designed specifically for K-12 education. Okay, give me just one moment because I would like you guys to view this slideshow. There we go. Over the last 2.5 years, we've worked with Google to introduce a line of CTL Chromebooks that have been recommended by PC Magazine as the best choice for Chromebooks in education. As part of our commitment to education, CTL is offering monthly professional development webinars for our education customers. These webinars will include a variety of topics relevant to K-12 EdTech, but will have a big focus on Google Apps for Education and Chromebooks in the classroom. Today's webinar is Google Forms for Educators, presented by Catherine Livick of our professional development partner, Education Service District 112 of Vancouver, Washington. However, before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right corner. You're listening in using your computer's speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select Telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. Amy will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time, you will be contacted by our sales representative to make sure all your questions are answered. Now, before we get started with Catherine, I just have a brief poll to find out how familiar everyone is with Google Forms. Maybe some of you have some experience, maybe you have worked in it a lot. Just we'll take a few moments here and see. Okay, almost everybody's voted. I'll give just a couple more moments. Okay, I'm going to share the results with everybody. Looks like kind of mixed, but definitely people with some experience here today. I'm sure you're going to learn a lot more from Catherine. So now I would like to introduce today's presenter, Catherine Livick, of our professional development partner, Education Service District 112 of Vancouver, Washington. Catherine is a Google certified trainer and Google certified administrator, and will take you through an overview of Google Forms. I'm going to switch over so Catherine can show you her screen now.
Alrighty, hi everybody. Just a second, I'm going to get the right screen going for you. You should see my slideshow now. Hi, I'm Catherine. As Stephanie mentioned, I'm a certified Google trainer and I'm a certified Google administrator as well. And I do instructional coaching in districts around our region. So I get to go out and see a lot of different implementations for Google Apps and see how people are using them and get great ideas from teachers as well as trying to help them come up with new ways to use tools. So I just like to let people know kind of where I'm coming from when I start doing these trainings. So the first question that people ask, and they usually can kind of come up with some of these answers on their own, but just what are the possibilities? And there are a lot, as you can see. Whatever you can think of to do with a form can apply to the classroom or can apply to a lot of other settings too. And when I first started with Google Apps, Forms was one of the first things I learned to use because I had a parent night coming up and I wanted to collect information from parents of the students in my class, and I wanted to do it digitally, and I didn't want a bunch of paper laying around. And you're always going to have some parents who prefer paper, and that's okay. So I had that for them, but I actually collected my parent information into Google Forms, had a spreadsheet of things like preferred method of contact, the thing they wanted me to know about their student that was the most important, all of that stuff that teachers need to know, kind of had it all in one place, able to easily manipulate the data, didn't have a pile of papers. I think I only had 4 parents who opted for the paper instead of the digital form. And so I just set it up in some computers in my room. I had 4 terminals available that people could sit at. And that was the greatest experience I had had at that point with Google Apps, and that kind of sold me on the whole thing. So I really love showing forms to teachers just to show them all the fun things they can do with it, not just with students to increase student learning, but also for yourself because you have a really big, huge, hard job. And it's good anytime you can find a tool that streamlines things for you. So that's what Forms is all about. You can collect information from parents, from students, from colleagues, a reflection form, feedback for anything. Parent night, like I said, some elementary teachers use it for lunch count. Lots of special education teachers are starting to use it to collect behavioral data or objective data for IEPs. It's really great for entry tasks and exit tasks because it's really quick and you get instant feedback. Really good formative assessment stuff. You can use it for equipment checkout and sign up. You can use it for an observation form. You can make worksheets, quizzes, tests, and just generally streamline a lot of the things that you do. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about some of these uses as we go through the presentation, but that's kind of the overview. And as we go through this presentation, if it occurs to you, hey, could I do this with it? That would be a question you could type in and we can talk about it at the end, assuming that I don't talk too long and leave some time for that. So Google is an ever-changing entity, and they love to spring new stuff on us, and that kind of freaks some people out. And I get that because we get used to using things and having them look a certain way, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, it looks different. Where did that button go? What happened? And often this will happen when you're using it in front of kids, and then you kind of feel dumb. So I have managed to reframe that for myself into a learning opportunity, and I kind of learned how to struggle through things in front of my students, and I feel like that was actually one of the biggest professional development leaps I ever made as a teacher. So I always mention this to people. It's like, we got to be flexible when things change, and Google is in the middle of a change right now with Forms. Depending on when you started using Forms or when your domain, your district, started using Google Apps, you may see the new Forms or the old Forms. And I'm going to show you the new Forms interface today. But even I just switched over to it a couple weeks ago. They roll these things out kind of in waves, and they allow you to go back to the old one. For a while, they were still rolling out some features that I use on a regular basis, so I didn't switch over right away. So even for me, some of this is a little bit new. But it is a really great interface and it works really well. So if you have used Forms before and you were using the old one, I would now recommend that you try the new one because they have brought back the data validation, the add-ons, and some of the other stuff they didn't have when they first rolled out this new interface. And if you do try it, you can always click the little runaway guide down at the very lower left of your screen, and you can go back to the old version. If you're using forms for the first time and it takes you into the new forms, it'll tell you you can take a tour, and that'll show you around a little bit, and hopefully we'll cover most of the stuff that would be covering anyway in this presentation. So when you start a new form, you usually start it from Drive. Some people get really used to starting from the Docs homepage or the Sheets homepage when they're using other Google apps. And Forms isn't really like that. I always encourage people to go back to Drive because all your stuff is in there. So when you do Forms, though, it's kind of hidden. When you click the red New button, you go down to the bottom and look at the More pop-out, and it's usually down there. This does depend somewhat on how your district has Google set up, but usually it's going to be down in that kind of corner. Once you have a new form open, you can add questions, and you have a whole bunch of different choices for how you can add them and what types of questions you can add. So I'm going to switch over to another screen here in a minute and show you how it looks to start a new form and just what it looks like when you have a brand new blank one open. All right. So this is my brand new untitled form, and there's a difference between the name of the form that's up here by the back arrow and the untitled form, actual name of title of the form that people will see. If I click down here and give it a name, it doesn't change anything up top. But if I click up here in the name field, it'll actually, assume that I want to name my form that, which is kind of handy. But just to be aware, it does not automatically name your form for you. So if you don't make sure you click up here, you're going to have a lot of untitled forms floating around in your Drive, and that can make it kind of difficult to find what you want. So I always recommend, as a best practice, go click up there, let the form name itself, and be ready to go back and find it later when you need to. Your title of your form is in this field, and you can give a description here which would have a little bit of instruction, on what to do or things they need to know to take this quiz or anything relevant to your form. And when I click down here in my untitled question that it's generated for me, I start to get some options. So I can name my question here. And then I have choices for what kind of a question it is. This would probably be a short answer question. That way they can actually type in the text box what their name is. Or if I was only giving this to a certain number of kids and I really wanted them to choose from a list, I could do a checkbox, a drop down. Multiple choice gives you the option to choose one correct answer. Check boxes allows you to select more than one correct answer at a time for a question. And a drop down just gives you a little list. You have a couple of other options here that get a little more complicated. A linear scale, so you can ask them to rate something on a scale of 1 to 5. You can ask them to fill out a grid, and it's kind of hard to explain how that one looks. That's kind of an advanced one, but it's one you might want to look into if you have a lot of data that you need to ask people about. You can also ask them to input a date or a time or both as the answer to a question. You can go through and select some other options up here with these little buttons in the top right. If you want to change the colors of your form, that's under this little paint palette here. And Google kind of chooses the complementary color for you. You keep it simple doing that. You can also add in an image to your header of your form by clicking that little image button. And there are a lot of pre-made illustrations that Google has come up with for you. They have some pretty cute stuff in here. Some of them are seasonal. If I choose that, it'll put it up here. Okay. I can also choose to upload my own picture. So some people like to have a picture of their class or their school. I can do it that way. So you have some options for customizing the way it looks. I can also click in this and look at some options over here. I can add a title and description for another section. This is how I add a new question here. I could add an image in. I could add a video. And this, because Google owns YouTube, it's going to encourage you to use the videos off of YouTube, which is kind of cool because I can just type right here in the YouTube box and find a video, select it, and it'll embed it right here in my form. I know that the puppies don't seem terribly educational, but you can actually use this as a tool when you're giving a quiz or a worksheet. You can ask a student to view a video, whether it's one that you've provided or something that you found that was appropriate online, and then have them answer questions about it right there in the form. This is just the video. This chunk here is just the video. So if I wanted to ask a question about the video, I would put it into another question below. So there are some basic settings that you need to know about when you're creating a form. And some of them are things that just make it easier for you to access the data. Some of them are confidentiality related. So it's pretty important to know where this stuff is. This little sprocket is your settings for most Google things. So when you see that in your form, up at the top, I'm going to switch back and forth here a little bit, so bear with me. This little sprocket here has my settings in it, and there are some things that I need to determine before I release this form into the wild. So this is my domain. If you go into a form in your district, if you're logged into your Google account making a form for your school, this will have your school district's name there, but this is my domain's name. And right now it says that anyone who is a member of my district and logged in to Google can access this form. If I want it to be public, I have to select anyone. And so that allows anyone in the world to view my form. So I have to be aware that that's going to be very public. It doesn't broadcast it. They have to still find it. But it does mean that if I share the link with someone outside my district or someone who's not logged into Google for my district, they will have the option to answer it. If I want just students or just people that are logged in via my domain to use this form, I can go ahead and do this handy little guy right here, which will automatically collect their username that they're logged into. And it will tell them, it'll give them a warning at the top that their username is being collected, so you'll be able to associate the data they enter with the person answering the question. Assuming their usernames, are something you can make sense of, because sometimes they're a little weird. But usually it's like first name dot last name or something, and you can tell who's answered the question. This is a really useful tool for students because even if you put in a field that says name, sometimes something will go wrong, or a kid will be in a bad mood and they'll type, Captain Underpants or something instead of their name. They think they're being funny. Any number of silly things can happen. So that's pretty handy. Or if you're dealing with kids who are young enough that they can click on items but really have trouble typing their name, this is another option for you. So that's a good thing to know about. If you want them, if they're taking a quiz and you don't want them to respond repeatedly and do it a bunch of times and give you a bunch of data you don't need, you can ask them to be able to submit only one response. This confirmation page here is pretty cool too. This is actually like a classroom management tool when you're using it in class. You can add any kind of response here, and what will happen is that when they click the submit button, when they're done filling out your form or taking your quiz, they will see the response that you type here. So it could be something really simple like thanks, or it could include some directions and they will actually usually read these and do it. It's kind of fun to see who actually paid attention to what the confirmation screen said. You can even add a link here if you want them to visit a certain page after they're done. Since they're on a computer already, you could do any number of things there. Down here we have some pretty important options too. So show respondents a link to do these things. The first one, submit another response, is not available because I already said I don't want them to be able to do that. But if you don't have that other box checked, this is an option. If you want them to be able to edit, that's handy. Sometimes when you have a form that you've sent out and it's for people to sign up to come to a meeting or something, or potluck, or whatever you're trying to get people to give you data for, they might need to go in and change their answer. And then if you check this box, they will be allowed to go back and change their answer if they have the link back to the form. This one is really important. See summary of responses. Much of the time you want the data that comes into the form to be private to you, or at least have control over it. If you check this box, the people who fill out your form will be given a link along with their submission message that allows them to see how other people are responding. Now this can be very useful if you're just doing a class poll, or you're just having people kind of express an opinion on something, and especially if it's anonymous data and you're not collecting their username with it. But if it's a test, or if it's some kind of confidential information, you want to be really sure that's not checked. It is not checked by default, but I always recommend scrolling down here just to be really sure, because it would be kind of ugly if you released some of these results to everyone who took the form. These presentation options apply to quizzes and tests, and also to much longer forms. Some of you, I'm sure, have filled out online forms on SurveyMonkey or on other platforms where it'll have a little progress bar at the bottom and say, hey, you're 25% done, which, you know, is good, I think, if you're doing a really long form. Because then people know that they don't need to give up yet, they're making progress. It's actually kind of a good thing to do if you have a really long form or quiz. Shuffle question order is an option that you have to just do exactly what it says. It'll change the order of the questions if they don't actually matter, because if you have a bunch of students taking a quiz all together in a lab or sitting close together and you're just a little concerned that their eyes might be straying from their own screen, that's one way to address that. And obviously not foolproof, but just kind of gives you another tool to hopefully keep them a little bit honest. So you can always check that if you want it to look a little bit different for every student that takes it. So the process of making a form is relatively simple. You start out by creating a form, you title it and name it, you add some questions, and then you are going to share the form with people, and we'll talk about how you do that. But there's a workflow for forms that it's all its own, and I've done a lot of forms of various levels of complexity, and I learned that the more times I would preview the form and see what it was going to look like to the people taking it, because it does look different to them, the more useful my data would be. Sometimes you know what you're asking and you go ahead and you type it out and then it makes sense to you and you can send it to someone else and they go, I don't really know what to do. And it's really easy to get into that situation. Well, at least for me. Maybe it's mostly me, but I have to go look at the form and try to view it with the eyes of someone who is not the creator of the form and see if it makes sense. I fill it out myself a few times before I release a form into the wild, especially a complicated one, because not only do I want to see how it behaves for my users, I want to see the usability and see if folks can really fill it out easily, but I also want to know what my data is going to look like. Because if I'm asking the questions the wrong way, I may not get the data that I'm hoping for, or I may get data that is harder to manipulate and harder to use. And I want it to be as easy as possible for me. I'm trying to use the robots to do the work for me. So I find that the more times I go through that, process of looking at it as a viewer and then really checking out what my data looks like, I get the better my form results are and the easier it is for me to use them. So that option is up here. Sorry, every time I switch over, it's a little bit strange. Sorry about that. My little eyeball here gives me a preview. So this is what my form would currently look like to anyone I was sharing it with. It's not really that clear what I want you to do here, so I would have some editing to do. Another thing I'm going to look at is the responses. You see the response tab has appeared here. I don't have anyone who's responded to it yet. I can decide whether the form's on or off, and I can look at my spreadsheet of responses here, and we'll go into that a little bit more in just a minute. So you do have a couple of other options. There's always that little 3 dots menu in a lot of your Google tools, and that's the More menu, and gives you some extra things that you can do with your form while you're editing. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory, and they probably look familiar as far as what you see in other Google tools, but I'll mention a few. The pre-filled link one was one that I first looked at and went, why would I ever want that? Why would I need to do that to a form? And then I had a form that I was using to collect evaluation data for a series of classes, and the form was pretty much the same except for the class name, and I needed a certain course number in it every time. But I didn't want to type a huge drop-down list and have people have to pick it. I didn't want them to have to know that weird number I needed in my data and maybe mistype it and kind of screw up my data for me. So I used this pre-filled link tool, and it allowed me to fill out the form for the class name and number, and then share that particular link with my students for the class of that day. And then they could fill out the evaluation, and I had it tied to the exact course number I needed, and it worked really great. So there are some uses for that. It was one of those kind of weird things that until I actually used it, I didn't realize how handy it was. But even if you're not there yet, just know that's there, and it may be that someday you are a Forms ninja and you need that information. It's under the 3 dots. The Add Collaborators link, this is one of the things that kind of confuses people. Forms behave slightly differently than other Google tools. You see that Send button up in the top right. You're used to a Share button. It works in a similar way, but what it does not do is allow anyone else to actually work on the form with you. For that, you need the Add Collaborators option under the More menu. And what that lets you do is have someone work on the form with you, contribute questions, edit it for you, or also the person that you add as a collaborator has full access to the results. So don't add anyone that you are afraid will tweak your data. But if you, for instance, have someone that doesn't need to edit the form but needs to see the data, you can still add them as a collaborator, and they would be able to view the spreadsheet data and the results of your form. And some people will use that, for instance, to bring an administrator into the loop for an evaluation of something that they're doing in class. They can have direct access to the data that the students are generating for you. So that's kind of a handy little tool. Now, when you share the live form, you have some things to think about. That red tiny URL that's up at the top right, you can go in there and you can start kind of taking my form for me, and you don't have to do that, but you certainly can. If it's confusing to you, don't worry about it. But if you want to, you can go in and take that test that I wrote, and you'll see the test changing as I go through and do some other things. And the point of this is to show you that it's really live. If I have a typo in a test and I've already sent it out to the kids, I can go ahead and change it, fix it. Anyone who logs in after that will see the new question or the changed typo or anything. So it really gives you the opportunity to keep tweaking it. You want to be careful about that if you have your response set up very carefully. But it also allows you to see data just piling in as you have kids taking a test or have parents responding to something, and that can be really exciting. Even if you do share that with a class and put that summary up on a screen, it's pretty cool. So if you guys want to go in and look at that, you can, but you don't have to. So sharing that form, you can use your send button, which is something you can do when you're sharing within a domain. You can use it to share outside your domain if your administrators allow you to. And when I say domain, I mean your school district. So some districts permit teachers to communicate with folks outside their district using Google tools, and some don't. So that will be dependent on your district. But that's one way to share it. And it does look kind of like the share button in many of the other Google tools, so that might be familiar for you. You can also copy the link of the live form and share it via email or any way that you want to, or you can embed it in another website, grab the embed code. I'm going to show you what that looks like here too. So here's my test form, and if I hit my send button here, and it goes ahead and gives me another chance to decide if I want everybody's username. Oh, and you know what? You guys can't see that form because look what I did. I totally messed up and didn't make it public. See? But I can change it right now. And believe me, you're going to do that a few times. I'm just so used to messing it up that it just hardly even phases me anymore. Now, if you load that link, you should be able to see it. Anyway, I can go in here. I can send via email. I can type a name right in here, and I can give them a little message. You have an option to include the form in the email. What that means is we'll actually reproduce the form itself in the email, and they can just click right on it in their email. This usually works in most email systems, works really well in Gmail. If you happen to be using Outlook, you'll have to tell it that you want to download the images, or it's going to look weird. My best practice normally is to not include the form in the email because I don't know what your email program is going to do to my form. It might look weird. It might make it so you can't answer some questions. I just don't know. So I would much prefer to have you as a recipient click on the link if I'm emailing this link to you and go fill out the form in Google so that I know that you're seeing what I'm seeing when I click that preview link. I can also add collaborators right from here. It kind of reminds me that's not the same thing. I can grab the link here. It does have a handy little shorten URL tool, but as you can see, it's really not that short. I mean, it's still this huge string of letters. It kind of looks a little nicer than the other way, but it's still pretty hard for people to type in. So if you just want to copy and paste that straight in an email, it does look nicer that way. Or if you want to write it on the board, but kind of that's why I use tinyURL because it really makes it short enough for people to actually understand what's going on. The embed code is here. These little carrots are HTML thingies, and that tells you that you can embed this into a website, and you can say how big you want it to be. I use that for trainings all the time. I see teachers who use it to collect information from students when they've put it into a website. You also have social share buttons, Google+, Facebook, and Twitter. So if you're doing Twitter with your students or Twitter for a professional learning community that you're in, or any of those tools, you can send a survey out directly to that social media website from here. Some other options that you have, some other options that you have are sharing with Google Classroom, just like any other Google file would be shared. You can use the Google Tone extension to share the live form page, which is kind of fun sometimes. It's usually easier to use Classroom if you're already using Classroom, but sometimes that's kind of a handy one. And yes, you can actually print out your form. Please don't. I wish you wouldn't, but on behalf of all the trees, don't do that. But sometimes you actually need to. And even though I'm a technology trainer, I am not a hater of the paper. I like Post-its, and I also taught special education for 11 years, and I realized that some students do a lot better with a hard copy, and some parents do, and adults do too. So it's really nice to have the option that is under that three dots menu, and it does a decent job of printing it out. It's not perfect, it's not beautiful, but it's usually quite usable, which I think is nice of Google to allow us to do that. They are intended to be shared digitally, but you do have that option. So now that we have some data in our form, we have to be able to get at that data and know what to do with it. And Google has generated a couple of ways for us to do that. When we're looking at our form in the edit mode, once we have some responses, it'll tell us that they're there. And we have a tab for questions and a tab for responses. When we click over to that, we'll be able to see our responses from individuals, responses from the group, and then we can view the whole spreadsheet of the raw data, at which point we can do anything we could normally do to a spreadsheet, we can do to that data. We can make charts, we can make graphs, we can apply functions and formulas, we can copy, we can paste, we can move columns around, we can do whatever we want. And editing the column headers in the spreadsheet does not change the questions on the form, and I'll show you what that spreadsheet looks like, so that'll make a little more sense. But you can tweak the spreadsheet even further so it helps you. You can also change the response destination, which just means which spreadsheet are you putting your stuff in, and you have a few other options there, and you can turn the form on or off with that accepting responses button. So looking back at my form, oh good, I turned that on, and now a couple other people are actually able to get in there. I can see because I have 4 responses and I had 2. So I can click over here, and this is my summary. And this is pretty slick. This used to be kind of hidden in your spreadsheet, but with the new forms, it's right there. So I have 50% yes and 25% yes please, and then 25% I don't know how I feel about it yet. So that's reasonable. And let's see. Oh, we're actually 50-50. I will tell you, there is a 1% or 50% of our answers are correct there. So, so I just get a quick visual, and it will decide based on the kind of question it is, whether it's going to give you a pie chart, a bar graph, a line chart. You know, it's pretty smart about that. You can go into the spreadsheet and create other kinds of charts anytime you like. But this is just what Google kind of generates for you. I think it's pretty cool. And kids love this, by the way. They love to see it, especially if you're polling an entire class, and they love to create their own data using this as a tool. If I click on the individual tab here, this will give me each person's response. Now, if one of my fields was name, I would be able to associate this response with an individual person. But I can see the answers changing as I scroll through these responses. Okay, it's kind of a good way to get a quick overview of what the responses look like. But if I want a lot of detail, I really want to go over here and view my responses in sheets. So when I click on that, you should be able to see my spreadsheet, and this gives me all the information that has been responded to. So the timestamp is an automatic field that it adds. You notice that I didn't add a question that said timestamp. It didn't ask me if I wanted the timestamp. It automatically collects that information, which can be pretty handy. If I had been automatically collecting username, it would have a column here that said username. But right now I just have my question names. So I could change this if I just wanted it to be a short answer. Whoops, if I could type, we'd be doing great. This does not change the way that my actual form looks. Doesn't change the name of the question. It just changes how I'm looking at the data. I can do anything to this that I would do normally. I can do data with a chart. I can add a drawing in here. I can do anything that I need to do. Just a spreadsheet, just like any other Google Sheet. I can export this into Excel and do fancy things to it. I can do whatever it is I want to do from here. So that's pretty handy. Because this spreadsheet was generated by a form, I have an extra menu up here that says Form, and it gives me some options. So it'll automatically name this spreadsheet the same name as, the same name as the form with responses in parentheses. I can change that name, but that gives me a naming convention that matches my form to my spreadsheet, so it's not a bad thing. And looking at my form menu here, if I want to go back and edit the form, if I click this, it'll take me right back into my form. So I don't have to go looking for it in my drive, which is kind of handy. I can send the form to someone else right from here if I notice that someone's data is missing. If I do this, it'll take me right back into it and let me send my form. And it gives me a few more options that are, you can see these are the same options we have in Icon form in the form itself. And if I want to see the summary of responses, you can see it's very similar and tells me how many people are responding per day. So the possibilities are pretty huge. When you look at it just in spreadsheet mode, there's just a lot of stuff that you can do. So that's just the very most basic thing that you need to know about creating forms. There are some pretty fancy things you can do with forms, and it just depends on how comfortable you're feeling with forms and what you want to do. And it's kind of fun to work in a lot of different districts and see a lot of teachers kind of get into this and get really excited about it. I mean, this is one of the tools that when I go do a professional development in a school and I start showing people, I mean, I don't even need to give them the whole list because they all go, ooh. And you know, when you're delivering professional development, sometimes it's fun to hear that sound because normally people are falling asleep, and it's nice to give them a little bit of a thrill. They really see the possibilities right away because, you know, teachers are very creative, and they can see how they would use this in a number of different ways. But there are some really fancy things you can do, and I've seen teachers who didn't even know how to use Google Docs or Drive at the beginning of a year, 6 months later doing really, really intense branched forms and finding some amazing data points that they could use. So I like to just let people know what the possibilities are. There is a mobile version, or you can access it via mobile phone. So if you're sending something out, say to parents, and not all of them are going to use a computer, they can totally fill the form out on their phone. You technically can create a form in Google Chrome on the mobile platform. It's really not a lot of fun. It's better with the new version than it was. I prefer to compose mine on a computer or Chromebook, but just to know that option is there. Branched forms is an advanced feature that's really exciting. A lot of teachers use this to create adaptive quizzes. So what a branched form is it allows you to assign a different path through your form based on the answer to a question. And many of you have probably done some map testing or some other kind of computer-based testing that is adaptive, and so you'll know what I'm talking about. If a student gets an answer wrong, you can send them to a screen where there's a review or a video to watch or something, and then have them go take another whack at that question. You can also create multi-path forms. For instance, if their answer for based on their answer for one question, they need to go answer a different set of questions, you can do that with branched forms. And I will not be showing you how to do that today because it's kind of more, once you've practiced with forms, it's something that you can learn to do, but it does take a while to practice. But just to know that's there, and the way you do that is by adding sections and pages to your form, and it's a lot of fun once you kind of get comfortable with the basics of forms. One of my favorite things to do and to show teachers how to do is to export form data to maps. A lot of people don't know that Google My Maps is part of their Google Apps suite of stuff that they can play with as teachers. And it is one of the best classroom tools that I've used. I used it as a social studies teacher. I used it as a language arts teacher. I've seen people use it for math and not just for geography. One of the simplest ways to explain what you can do with this is you can do a form where you ask students, what's your ideal vacation spot? And you can ask them to input that form data in a way that allows it to be exported to a map, and it will generate a map of where everybody wants to go on vacation. Kids love this. It's so impressive to see, and that's just the most basic usage of it. If you ever take a class or a webinar or a seminar on My Maps, I think you'll immediately see the connection, and it's a really, really fun tool to use. If you're getting pretty good at Google Sheets and you want to try playing with some third-party add-ons, you have a lot of options that you can do. There is one called Autocrat that's an add-on for Sheets that you get from within the Sheets application. And you can do mail merge. So if any of you remember the old school mail merge, what that will do is allow you to create a template for a letter or a document and then dump your data into it and generate individual documents based on the responses in a spreadsheet. Of course, you don't have to start with a form to do that, but it's a really cool way to get information out to people. So it's good to know about. There is scripting you can do if you want to get really fancy. There are a lot of other add-ons that work with it and work directly out of forms. The little puzzle piece that is at the top of the toolbar in your forms creation page allows you to add add-ons, which just create a whole bunch of other things you can do in forms. For instance, you can have the form be limited to a certain number of responses. You can have it automatically turn off after a deadline has passed. You can have it eliminate choices from a multiple choice question. Like if you're doing conference sign-up appointments and you want that appointment to go away so nobody else can sign up for it, once it's been signed up for, you can do that. So when you get a little bit better at Sheets, that's some really cool stuff to take a look at. Looking in the puzzle piece at Forms, looking at the puzzle piece at the top of your form, and at the add-ons menu in Sheets. There's one other add-on for Sheets that almost every teacher wants to know about, and that is called Flubaroo, and you get at that from the add-ons menu in Google Sheets. Sheets and Forms just work so closely together that you kind of have to know both of these things. Flubaroo allows you to automatically grade multiple choice questions, or even short answer ones, depending on how you set it up, which is pretty awesome. I don't know about you. I do not like grading. I love teaching. I love reading what kids write, but I don't like grading, and if I can get an automatically graded quiz or worksheet when I'm doing a brief formative assessment, something that isn't an extended answer, I'm happy to have the robots do that for me. So Flubaroo is definitely something to investigate. Pre-filled links, we kind of talked about that already, something handy to know, and adding collaborators who can view your form and your data, or edit your form and view the data, very handy to be able to do. And I have some resources here which we can send out after the webinar. If you're curious about how else you can use forms in the classroom, there's a really great site that can give you some ideas on how it's been used. And there's a video that shows you how to do the self-grading quizzes with Flubaroo. And it does show the old version of forms. I don't think anyone has really gotten around to updating this kind of video with the new version. But you'll see how it works, and I think it'll make sense to you. All right, I think I'm done talking at you. Are there any questions?
Good morning. Thank you, Catherine. This is Amy Alcalisi with CTL. I'm the EdTech Project Manager here, and I will go through these questions from your presentation today. It looks like we have a couple of the same, so I won't go through every single one. Denise has a question, says, when you practice the form before releasing it, then delete the responses, the data still seems to hold the results. Is that true?
If you're talking about the form summary, I think it takes a while to catch up. But if you actually delete it out of the spreadsheet and then generate, here I'll actually switch back to the screen and show you what I'm talking about.
I'm sorry, that question was actually from Lauren.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's if I go to the form menu here in my spreadsheet and go show summary, that will probably update. I don't know how rapidly the one that's actually in forms, like this guy, will update. Because again, this is a new version of forms and I have not experimented to that degree with that, but that's a really good question. But I would say if you really want to make sure it's keeping up with you, I would generate a response summary from the forms menu in the spreadsheet.
Okay. The next question is from Jackie. It says, so you cannot view data without being a collaborator? I think she
Yeah.
means, yeah.
Well, as the creator of the form, I'm the only one who has access to the spreadsheet for the form. Now, if I want to add someone to the just the spreadsheet without having them be a collaborator on the form, I can do it this way with my usual share. But you can do it straight from forms with that Add Collaborators button.
Okay, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Next question's from Paula. Test forms not open outside the owner's organization. I think.
Oh yeah, are you talking about the my little script there? I think that's what they're letting us know is that,
It might be,
that I
yeah.
hadn't had it opened outside our organization, which I didn't when I first started talking about it, so sorry about that. But it works now.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Riley says, is there a way to have multiple classes take the same quiz on a form and then sort the responses alphabetically while still keeping the class periods organized?
There is. You can play around with this. Here, let me show you the spreadsheet here. What I would do is I would select the response destination, and once period 1 was done taking it, I would create a new spreadsheet or an existing spreadsheet I'd created for this, and I would have them, I would call it test responses period 2 or whatever. And then all my responses from then on would go into that spreadsheet. And then when I was in that response spreadsheet, and I'm just going to show you my old one, I could definitely, if I had this as name data or usernames, I could sort this A to Z if I wanted to. And then I could sort each individual spreadsheet individually if I wanted to by alphabetical order.
Okay. So this is a question that was addressed, but I want to address it again. Donna asked, can you send the link for the Flubroo video and Molly's site? And to answer other questions, yes, you will get those links.
They'll send that out afterwards. I'll make sure they have that info to send to you.
And the last one's from Barbara. It says, can we upload questions or answer choices into forms?
It depends on what you mean by upload. There are some kind of cool things that you can do. For instance, if I create a new question, I want it to be multiple choice or checkboxes or drop down, I can take a list and paste it in here. So let's see, it might work like this. If I have two options and I want to paste that in, it knows that I want those to be two individual rows. So if you're asking, can I type this out in some other less cumbersome format and then paste it in if I have a lot of options, the answer is yes. As far as a different kind of import, there's nothing that I'm aware of, like importing it from a different kind of test or a different survey system.
Okay, I think all of the questions have been addressed that I can see. And if you have another question, this would be your last chance to ask it. Otherwise, we will close this webinar in a few minutes.
Hi, this is Stephanie back on the line. Yeah, thank you so much, Catherine. That was really informative, and I learned some new tricks. And I'm going to put some contact information up. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. If you have any other questions, you can contact Amy at the email you see there. Once you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a survey on the presentation. We'd appreciate it if you could complete that and provide your feedback. And then, as we were saying, you'll also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. And in that email, I also include the links, like we were talking about Molly's link and the Fubaloo. So on behalf of CTL and our presenters, thank you for joining us today, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.